There we go. Hi, Aimable, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Yes, so at EIHR, we cultivate partnerships among educators globally to create materials and deliver training based on best practices in Holocaust education. Together, we deliver content and strategies for teaching mass atrocities history, genocide prevention, and sustainable peace. Today's webinar is one in a series entitled Human Rights Education in Everyday Classrooms, Why and How, created by our education coordinator in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Alma Jeryl. Our next program will be Sunday, November 29th at noon Eastern Time, and will focus on the use of the arts in human rights education. For today's program, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we will get to them after everyone has spoken. We will also share a link at the end of the webinar for you to join a meeting after the webinar to ask questions of our panelists and share in a conversation for about 30 minutes. So feel free to click on that link at the end. I'll put it in the chat box. We'd love to have a further conversation afterwards. And now Alma Jeryl, our education coordinator, will introduce today's panelists. Alma?
Thank you, Kim. So my name is Alma Jeryl. I'm the education coordinator in Bosnia and Herzegovina with the Educators Institute for Human Rights. I welcome you, and I'm personally very much looking forward to the presentations and to this webinar. Our first presenter is Jeryl Payne. Jeryl Payne teaches at Mount Vernon Community School in Alexandria. Jeryl has been teaching for 20 years in primary and middle schools in the United States and South Korea. She holds a master's degree in curriculum and instruction and reading. So I'm very much looking forward to this. Thank you very much for being with us, Jeryl.
Thank you. Let me try to share my screen again. All right, here we go. Oh, no, that's not the right one. Sorry. It worked a few minutes ago. Hold on. Sorry about that. It's not opening now. All right, everybody. Technical difficulties, of course. Okay, let me close this. Oh gosh, everybody.
We're all teachers, we understand.
I know this, but it's crazy. Like we just opened it. So I'm like,
yeah,
oh no.
We know it's there.
It exists, I promise people. I'm not making this up. Okay. All right, let me see now. I wonder. Yeah, this is basically my life. Yep. Okay, let's try this one. All right. See something now? Maybe?
Yes, it's loading and yeah, there it is. You're good.
Okay. Whew, okay, well, that's a great way to start. But anyway, hello, everybody. Like Alma said, I am Jeryl Payne, and I teach in Alexandria, Virginia, which is about 10 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. And I wanted to share one of my social studies lessons that I have to do that has to do with holidays. So in America, unfortunately, many of our non-religious holidays are very, very complicated. So they may honor people or events that have oppressed, enslaved, or killed another group of people. So today I will talk about a lesson that I do with my class about Indigenous Peoples Day or Columbus Day, depending on where you live in the country and what you believe. So first, I just want to tell you what I'm going to be talking about. So first, I want to give the background of my school. Then I want to give you a short version of my teaching philosophy and how I feel about building class community. I'll go over the lesson in its entirety, and then finally, I'll give you my process on how I develop the lesson. So on the screen, you can see the demographics of my school. And from the demographics, you can see that, It's predominantly Hispanic, my school, and then the next largest group is white. Over half of the students receive free or reduced price lunches, and about half are English language learners. So to explain my teaching philosophy, I like to use this image. And you've probably seen this image before, but just for fun in the chat, if you can tell me what you see on the screen. Let's see. If I can find the chat. Okay, someone said a lady, a face. People are getting back in touch. An older woman. Okay. A young girl. So those of you who see nothing, maybe you now can get some tips from the people in the chat, or maybe they saw something that you didn't see. And so thank you for participating there. This kind of describes my teaching philosophy, and that's when teaching history, students need to learn from different perspectives so they can get a better idea of the quote unquote real story. And they should be able to develop their own perspectives to understand the events in the present. So to really bring home this idea of perspective, this is the book that I use with almost all of my classes, regardless of level. I use this book called Round Trip by Ann Jonas, and it tells a story of a family traveling to and from the city through these optical illusion drawings. So you read from right to left, they go to the city, and then you flip the book over, and then they come back home. And the kids I could read this book 1,000 times and they never get tired of it, and it doesn't matter age. So the other thing that I like to do before I really get into our second grade curriculum is I like to make sure I'm building class community, and to give students a perspective of the people that we'll be learning about during the year. I try to start with the history of the oppressed or marginalized people so that the students have an understanding that these people who were affected had lives before their encounters with the people who tried to conquer or oppress them. And also, most of my students come from Central America, so I like to start with their own heritage. So we talk a lot before we get into Christopher Columbus and Indigenous people. We talk about Central America and the Caribbean. So this is usually a week-long lesson plan, and I try to start the first week of October. And in second grade, we learn about what makes a good citizen and about different holidays throughout the year. So day one, I pose this question: what holiday will you celebrate on October 12th? And so the date, of course, varies, but it's always the second Monday in October that we have this holiday. And so then I go into what holidays are, because this is really the first holiday we talk about during the year, and who celebrates holidays. And then I just for an FYI for people on the call who might not know, Indigenous Peoples Day is a holiday that celebrates and honors Native American people and commemorates their histories and cultures. And it's an official city and state holiday in various localities. Now, Columbus Day, on the other hand, is a US holiday. So that means it's recognized nationally, and it commemorates the landing of Christopher Columbus in the Americas in 1492. And it's been an official holiday since 1937. So, like most teachers, I like to start with, what do you already know? And when I do this, I already know that in first grade, they learn so much about Christopher Columbus, and they like to tell me everything that they know about Christopher Columbus. So, I let them share, and then most of them have never heard this word indigenous. So most of them have no idea about Indigenous Peoples Day. And I incorporate art a lot into my classroom. So I like to start with an activator lesson like this one that I call Jump In, which is a learning strategy where I choose a few students to come up and freeze as one of the people in the painting. Then the other students have to guess which person in the painting are they supposed to be. And so this strategy is good because it helps my students gain a deeper personal understanding of the portrait. And then it also helps the other students who are looking to look more closely at the art. And I like this strategy because regardless of reading level or language level, all students can participate in this activity. And so I might also do an activity like this. I would show another image, and I might do an activity called See, Think, Wonder. And so I might do the first one, or I might do the second one, probably not both. And in this activity, all of the people would just look at it, and then I would say, what is something that you see? And just, basically, what do you see? What is something that it makes you think of? And what is something that it makes you wonder? And so I would just call on people asking them that question. And if we were all physically together, I would have all of you participate in this too, just so you could get a feel for how this activity works. And See, Think, Wonder is an strategy that I got from Project Zero. And this routine encourages students to make careful observations and thoughtful interpretations. So it helps stimulate curiosity and it sets the stage for inquiry. So this is a great enrichment option for the same lesson for those students who always have the answer. This helps them slow down their thinking, and that would probably be all I would do on the first day, is just that activator. Then on days 2 and 3, I would ask, so now what do you want to know about Indigenous Peoples Day? And we would review what we talked about the previous day. And then I would, give them some more information about the 2 holidays. So during the week, I would display all of the books that I'm going to possibly read during the week. And I read one book each day, and I would ask them, just based on the cover, who does this book honor, Columbus or the Indigenous people? So that would be the first thing I would ask them each day. And then while I'm reading the story, I would have them think of these questions while I'm reading. So this will help them listen more critically. I would ask them to keep track of the answers to these questions, or some that are similar to this. So this is also a time that I would use video, and I would show 2 short videos, one for each group of people. And so the kids will have, everybody will have like a common background of information. And these videos that I use come from an application that we use in Virginia called Brain Pop. And the students love Brain Pop. So I don't know if it's a worldwide thing, but they love this because they can learn about whatever they want to in these short videos. And they use familiar characters in every video that the kids can, relate to. So after we watch the videos, we may complete a fill in the blank activity like the one that you see here, to make sure students have a common understanding of Christopher Columbus and Indigenous people. And then on day 4, I would ask them, okay, what have you learned? And our hope always as teachers, after you've done the review, you hope that they've learned at least one new thing about, whatever you're teaching. And so then at that point, they should be ready to apply what they have learned. And so again, I'll pose the question from day 1, what holiday will you celebrate on October 12th and why? So at this point, each student would get a sticky note and they can use these sentence starters to help them write their sentences, but it's not mandatory. And again, this is something I use across grade levels. You know, whether you're a second language learner or whether it takes you a long time to retrieve information, you know, sentence starters are always helpful. So this is what it looks like. And, you know, I call it an exit ticket because I'll say, this is your ticket out the door. Like, you can't leave until you fill out your sticky. And I always love to see what they write. Second graders are very creative thinkers. And so I've done it a few years now. And, you know, it helps me know when I do this, you know, if they got it or if I'm going to need to come back to it at a later time. So here are a couple responses from the students who will celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. So the first person said, because I think someone in my family is from one of the places. And then another person said, because my grandmother just loved to celebrate it, talking about Columbus Day, but she died in 2017. So you just never know. You never know what they're going to say. And then I teach 2 groups of kids each day. So here is the other chart and some reasons why these students will celebrate Columbus Day. So a couple of the responses: because he gave people presents, he was a good person. It's fun and it's our responsibility to celebrate. I'll celebrate because Christopher Columbus gave them gold. So, you know, that's a trigger for me. Somebody didn't quite get it. So we might need to talk about that again. Now, Kim, I hope this is okay. I just feel like I'm just talking in a vacuum. Am I okay on time, or I need
You are doing great. Yes, thank you, Jeryl.
Okay. All right. So if we have time for this, or on day 5, I like to talk about what our city does concerning the 2 holidays. And so since last year, I've been able to use this primary source to explain how Alexandria made the decision to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And so, I can talk about primary sources. I can talk about what a resolution is. And also, I can ask the kids to find out about other cities, like, do they celebrate Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, if they're interested in finding that out. So I'll try to be brief, I think, with this, but I want to talk to you about how I go about the process of planning a lesson like this. And of course, we always have to start with our district objectives. And I also incorporate objectives from a source called Teaching Tolerance. And their mission is to help teachers and schools educate children and youth to be active participants in a diverse democracy. So, we have to teach that top standard, but the bottom one is the one that I want them to understand, because at this point, the idea of slavery will possibly come up. And then when I'm choosing my books and videos, I might use a critical reading checklist like this one. And I like to use this one from another organization that I am very involved with, called Teaching for Change. And this organization is focused on creating a more socially just curriculum. So many of the books that I choose, especially for this activity, would fit the criteria and not fit the criteria. I want to have both so that the students can come to their own conclusion about whether this thing is honoring both groups of people. And then when I am choosing images, we're very fortunate in this area that many of our local museums have online resources where teachers can access the collections. And 2 of my favorite museums that I use for this lesson are the National Portrait Gallery and the National Museum of the American Indian. So I've mentioned quite a few online resources, and I strongly suggest any of these sites that you see listed here. The only problem is I'm not sure which ones can be accessed overseas, but all of them are worth a try. And I will put a list of the resources in the chat for you as soon as I'm finished here. So I just want to recap that regardless of student level, age, or curriculum, these are 4 things that I try to remind myself of when teaching history. That the standards are just the baseline, know your students, build relationships, teach from multiple perspectives, and try to remember that our job is to educate, not to indoctrinate. So I use those standards, but I also, if you have not seen The Danger of a Single Story by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, her TED Talk, I highly, highly recommend it. It tells exactly what I've been talking about here. And I just want to say thank you for listening. I wish I could see all of you. I don't know if there are people there or not, but I look forward to talking to you all later in the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeryl. That was great. And yes, we have a lot of participants.
I see there are people.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just seeing it now. Okay.
And if you participants have any questions for Jeryl, again, feel free to put those in the chat box.
And I'm going to put, is it okay to put the resources in the chat now?
Please.
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
Kim, if I may, I just want to take a minute and brag, because I see some folks from the Mount Vernon School community, and what most of you may not realize is that Jeryl and I taught together for 6 years before becoming the ED full-time for Educators Institute for Human Rights. We were in the same school, and you know, we're just a lot of Mount Vernon pride going on right now, and I'm so happy to have Jeryl presenting. Also, Jeryl, I don't think you realized that we actually had a long conversation about the danger of a single narrative on the last webinar. So
look at us, we've come full circle from your last time. That's good teaching.
Yes, and thank you all for indulging my MVCS pride. Great job.
MVCS, thank you everybody from MVCS.
And so Alma is going to next introduce our panelists from Rwanda. Alma?
Thank you so much, Jeryl. This was really inspiring. And thank you for showing us examples for younger students as well, which is very important. I think Kim or Kate mentioned that in the chat box. Our next presenters are from Rwanda, Aimable Mpayimana and Vena Nzamburabaho. I hope I pronounced it correctly. And Aimable is the Director of Education with the Educators Institute for Human Rights. Aimable holds a bachelor's degree in education and an MA in development studies. Vena is a teacher at the Teacher Training College and holds a bachelor's degree from the National University of Rwanda in the Department of Modern Languages and a postgraduate diploma from the University of Kigali. So I'm very much looking forward to this as well. And the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Orma. Yes, today is really a special day because I'm glad to share with you my class experiences, especially what happened to me 8 years ago when I was teaching communication skills to students from one of the schools located in the eastern part of Rwanda. Actually, that's a school to orphans, and I really had a wonderful experience there. And today, I'm very pleased because I'm on this call with one of my former students, Delphine. So please, Delphine, can you please say hi?
Hi, everyone.
Cool. So, Delphine, you're most welcome. Please feel free to share what happened in that class. 8 years ago. You've completely changed, but yes, I'm very sure I remember everything. Cool. So, Kim, how can I share my screen? Okay.
Oh, do you see share screen at the bottom?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And when you click that, it will share your screen.
Okay.
There you go. Perfect.
Oh, yes. So can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad. Cool. So these are my students, and actually this is Delphine, who is next to me. And I taught how to fight discrimination, basically starting from the story of Anne Frank. So the school there is Agahos Shalom Youth Village, and I was there between 2011 up to 2014. So glad. So with my lesson objectives, I really wanted my students have a basic understanding of the Diary of Anne Frank, because Holocaust is taught here in Rwanda, but of course, we also have the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, but students are expected to have some information about the other mass atrocities, including the Holocaust that occurred beyond Rwanda. So Holocaust is taught, but if you look at how it is taught, well, it doesn't really occupy a very big space on the national curriculum. And when it comes to the Diary of Anne Frank, well, it was relatively new to my students. So I really wanted to have a basic understanding of the story of Anne Frank. And I also wanted them to start from the Diary of Anne Frank and discuss the consequences of discrimination. And thirdly, I really wanted to identify examples of courageous people that fought discrimination across the history, such that they can follow in their footsteps. If I take you back a little bit, I probably forgot to tell you that that school was a school to vulnerable children, actually who became vulnerable because of discrimination. Discrimination based on that really related to genocide against the Tutsi. So most of those children I was teaching, their parents died during the 1994 genocide. So this was really a very indispensable or sensitive topic, if I can put it in that way, because it was very easy for my students to draw connections between class content and their personal background. So how did it start then? I started with line game. So this is a map you can see on the line, and these are my students. So I started with the line game, and the way that the line game works, you divide the class into two groups, and they have to form parallel lines facing each other. So all the time you ask questions, and if they have to respond yes to the question, they have to step on the line. If the response to your question is no, there's no movement necessary. So what happened then, you start with just general questions and you move to more specific and sensitive question that has to do with your listening content. So towards the end, when I asked, step on the line, if you ever suffered from discrimination, all students stepped on the line. They never said anything. All of them stepped on the line, but looking at their faces, there was really something going wrong. So we did a reflection on the activity. Some of them felt felt what they learned from the activity, but most importantly, they were able to develop that strong bond. They were really very young, considering the village mission. The school mission was to restore the rhythm of life, because those are children that went through a very difficult background. But it was a great opportunity to build stronger bond among themselves, because they ended up realizing that through this activity, all of them, in one way or another, went through discrimination, or their siblings or their parents suffered because of the discrimination. So, well, that's what happened. Of course, all of them faced discrimination, and went back to class with new knowledge about each other and, of course, themselves. So in a class, then what happened? I, of course, introduced the story of Anne Frank using a short film that approximately has 5 minutes. And after that film, I was able to ask some questions reflecting the content. So who is Anne Frank? How do you think love of Anne Frank when it comes to writing can inspire you? And most importantly, if you look at this lady, almost 1, 2, 3 from left side, 30% from the left, that was my colleague Yael from Jerusalem, who really read a lot about the Holocaust and who knew much information about Anne Frank. I also seized that good opportunity to have her in my class as a guest speaker to help my students understand much better the story of Anne Frank on the top of that video that I had showed them. So now here was the most important section of the lesson plan. I really wanted them to connect the story of Anne Frank. I really wanted them to connect the story of Anne Frank with discrimination. But here my suggestion was to ask students to connect the story of Anne Frank with their own background, and they had to be personal. It was like it is. Yes, what happened in German or in Holland probably happened your own way, but of course, we won't compare pains, but from this story of Anne Frank, I'm very sure you can draw some similarities. So please, this is your time to share. Students were able to come up with very sensitive issues that I personally was not aware about. Students were able to develop very strong connections among themselves, starting from the story of Anne Frank, going to their own individual stories they were freely sharing. So here, of course, Delphine was there. And I'm very glad because she has just joined this call alongside with me. So Delphine, what did you respond by that time? How did you experience discrimination in your own way?
That time I gave an example of my siblings who have experienced discrimination. You know, their father died in 1994 during genocide against Tutsi, and of course they have experienced discrimination in so many ways, like killing their father, and we share the same mother. So their father died in 1994, and that's when they experienced discrimination. And after genocide, there was like people used to discriminate others. That's the example I gave that time.
Okay. And asked my students, how do you think the story of Anne Frank can inspire you in fighting discrimination in your own way? Of course, students like Delphine shared that powerful testimony reflecting her personal background. And here is again another most touching testimony that I still keep. So Chantal Butera said, after these classes on Anne Frank, I must help my students cherish principles of human rights and eradicate hate. That was really something very powerful. And I used to ask my students to write such kind of testimony. So I still keep this one of Chantal. So now I was able to compile all my students' testimonies about Anne Frank and how Anne Frank has been able to inspire them. In other words, I was able to compile connections or parallels my students were able to draw from the story of Anne Frank to their personal lives. And this is what happened. All this, can you see this frame? I'm sure you can see this picture on the screen. All these are my students. I'm the one who is in the middle. So you can't read everything, but basically this is what each student wrote about her inspiration of Anne Frank, how she was able, or he was able to connect the story of Anne Frank with her own background, with her own life. So I was able to compile all these students' testimony, put them or make a frame. And the time I went to visit Anne Frank house, Amsterdam in 2000 and I think 2015, I donated this frame of my students' testimony to Anne Frank house, Amsterdam, and it is still hung in the office of Anne Frank house. So you guys, whenever you go there to Amsterdam, you go to find this. So these are students' testimonies compiled about Anne Frank. How can Anne Frank inspire them in their day-to-day life? So now, from the story of Anne Frank, I really wanted my students to be human rights defenders. How did I proceed with this? I asked them to look for examples across history of people who fought against discrimination. Well, when I gave them this activity, I later on became very impressed because what I saw, it was beyond my expectations. Students were really learning other skills like doing research. They went around the school talking to administrators in order to compile information. They learned, I mean, they polished up their skill of doing research on the internet, and they really came up with very powerful examples of people to emulate. They really listed very great names of people that they think they have to follow in their footsteps. So on the presentation day came, they started presenting their findings. Who are the people, for instance, that they think they have to emulate, in which way, how can they do that? So idea of sketch just came, and they were presenting their findings in the form of a sketch. So on the first day then, I would say it was just inside the classroom, one class. But when we realized how it was really great, how it was very inspirational, my students and I decided to invite school administrators and other students. So I will say it really worked well, and students, I mean, from this activity, from this exercise, students were able to learn more skills. Students were able to learn like how to present. Because of their background, most of them were less confident, but considering the fact that they were called upon to stand up, do research, present in front of their peers and the school administrators, they really said they were able to develop confidence. And most importantly, they said that they were able to understand the essence of human rights and how they can support their peers to not infringe upon others' rights. So that was something really great. And on this picture, these are my students. Third one from left is Delphine, who is next to me. So Delphine, how did you feel about the sketch activity that time then?
It was really helpful because it was not about the story. It was not just about the story. It was very open. You could learn a lot of skills like communication, public speaking, leadership, being creative, because we were the one to create the sketches. So it opened our mind, like, and it was very helpful.
Okay, how is it still helpful today in your day-to-day work? I know you graduated from college and now you have a job. Yes.
Of course, the skills I learned from there are the ones I'm using right now, like communication, the way I talk to people in public is very different from the way I was before the activities. And yeah, most especially communication and the creativity and leadership.
Okay, I'm glad. So one of these students is Beris. So this is Charlotte. Charlotte to me a very powerful letter that I'm still keep up to now. So Charlotte, dear teacher, I'm excited to give you this letter. Before I was shy, but now I'm confident because I can stand in front of the audience and make a speech. The sketch has helped me to know heroes. I want to encourage all people that are still shy to build their confidence. Otherwise, they will never go far. Berize uwa mahoro. So this is basically how I taught my students how to fight discrimination using the story of Anne Frank as a tool. So I will say it's not really easy because teaching about human rights requires a holistic approach. You need to see how to adapt pedagogy. You must try your best to be much more creative. But in all that, to me, it has really been an enjoyable experience because most of the time when you are a teacher, you have to ask yourselves, what type of education I really wish to my students? In which future am I envisioning in my students? I really loved what my colleague said before when she said that our job is to educate, not to indoctrinate. So in order to better educate students, especially these young minds, you have to make sure that you bring in human rights principles. So quotation of this diplomat I'm reading for you will probably inspire you as I'm moving towards the end. He said, that's the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, Zaid bin Rad. 8 of the 15 people who planned the Holocaust in 1942 held PhDs. They shone academically and they failed to show the smallest shred of ethics and understanding. I'm increasingly supportive of the proposition that education of any kind is devoid of a strong universal human rights component and can be next to worthless when it should matter most in a crisis when a world begins to unravel. So I really love this because whenever I look at this, I really value much better why I have to try my best in my own way in whatever topic I'm supposed to be teaching my students. I have to always ask myself, how can I bring in human rights principles? How can we make these human principles cross-cutting such that we can really educate students that will grow up as better citizens who will all the time fight discrimination and other ills the entire world has been confronting. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. And Aimable has a teacher joining us briefly named Venant. And Venant, if you would like to jump in at this point.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay. Vena, I'm not with Vena because he has a separate invitation to join. Hello, Kim.
Yes, I just saw that Venant says he's not getting sound. Look at your mute button. Let me see if I can unmute you. You have two, it just says I can ask you. Venant has two, there we go. Try that. I am not hearing anything. It says you're unmuted though. If that doesn't work, we could move on and then come back to Venant, if that's okay. And maybe we'll get it figured out by then. Okay, so Alma, do you want to go ahead and introduce our next speaker?
Yes,
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, thank you, Aimable. Thank you, Delphine, for joining us. As I said, I'm really moved by the fact that Aimable is here with his former student, who is now a teacher herself. I think that's wonderful, and I wish to do the same thing one day. And I do have some of my students joining us today too, so I'm quite moved by that. So our next presenters are as fantastic. And Catherine Dawson, Dr. Catherine Dawson is an associate professor in the Department of Theater and Dance at the University of Texas at Austin. She serves as director of the Drama for Schools program. Dr. Dawson is an internationally recognized consultant in creative learning and teaching and a pioneer in drama-based pedagogy. Milicia Jošić-Milinović will join us too. Milica is a senior teaching assistant at the University of Banja Luka in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Milica holds a master's degree in Anglo-American literature, which she also teaches. And Senada Bajrović is an English language teacher at the high school Druga Gimnazija Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. She's dedicated to enhancing student engagement and inclusive teaching practices. So I'm looking forward to your presentation too, and you may start.
Thanks so much, Alma. I really appreciate that generous and lovely invitation. I'm going to move us over now to share my screen, working with the same awkward transition moment that we've all grown familiar with. So here we go. So again, my name is Katie Dawson of our 3-person presentation team. I'm going to start us off first. I do want to just take a moment to thank the folks at EIHR for having you with us today. We're really delighted to be and deeply honored to be a part of such a fantastic panel. So I think I'm taking copious notes and making all sorts of plans to invite all the other panelists to come speak to my students as we listen. So this is just terrific. So in the next period of time, we are going to try to do the following very quickly. We're going to give a little bit of a definition to the kind of practices we use, which align actually quite beautifully with the other folks who've spoken today. This work we call drama-based pedagogy. I'm going to give you a bit of overview on that. Talk a little bit about where and how it's gotten developed and its relationship to equity and justice, teaching and learning practices, human rights issues, etc. We will use that as a translation into a project that the 3 of us are engaged with called the 1BIH, Bosnia and Herzegovina One Book Project, where we're working with a young adult novel, I have it here in front of me, that looks at racial justice, particularly in the violence against Black bodies and systemic inequity in the US as a way to have conversations and dialogues with young people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we'll talk about that kind of bridging between cultures. And lastly, we're going to take you through a lesson. So we're going to kind of move through this whole sequence with you. All right, I have to go down. All right, so just a tiny bit of background on how this project got started, that the lesson comes from. I am the head of a program called Drama Schools. Are we okay? Okay, sorry. I'm the head of a program called Drama for Schools at the University of Texas at Austin, where I'm located. We are a professional learning model. We work with schools, school districts, sometimes governments and countries who are interested in increasing the learning culture, improving the learning culture of classrooms. And I think part of what our piece as a kind of third in the kind of sequence of our piece is really focused on, and our work is really focused on the kind of fundamental building blocks of classroom culture that we need to create just and equitable classrooms. So what are those kind of teaching and learning environments that we want to build in our classrooms? I think you're going to hear, do you want to say something, Kim, real quick?
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Venant, if you could mute yourself, I'm trying to mute and I'm not able to. There we go.
No worries at all. Okay, thanks so much. Anyway, so we do this work with all K-12 education as well as up in higher ed as well. So the work, again, that we're practicing is something we call drama-based pedagogy. In short, it is a set of practices that come from better practices in active teaching as well as the arts. We're really thinking about the sweet spot of how the teaching strategies we use bring together those cognitive learning moments, the affective or the social emotional space that we know is so huge in terms of how we're going to be able to participate, our sense of belonging in our learning, as well as the aesthetics. I mean, I think about both of the other presentations we just saw and kind of beautiful ways they were using the arts. So this is secretly the arts session as well. I didn't want to tell you that early, but we are also, I think, really building up some of the kind of power and harnessing some of those power of the arts in our work this week, as well as the next session you'll run here. And we do all this work with a real focus in our practice towards something we call dialogic meaning making. And again, ties right into other things you've heard from other presentations today. We name out and make explicit that kind of socio-constructivist way that we can exchange in the classroom and build upon one and each other's ideas. So it's not just the teacher who owns all that knowledge and they're filling you full of it, but that young people are bringing their funds of knowledge, their rich experiences into that dialogue with the educator and each other to come up with a more complex and nuanced and multi-rich perspective sense of understanding based on that exchange. And because we do bring our work very explicitly from the arts, dialogue becomes a really powerful set of practices that are using visual and the body, as well as the way we speak and hear and take on knowledge in that way. So to kind of break that down a little bit more, 4 kind of big research-based ideas that we talk about in drama-based pedagogy starts first and foremost with the fact that we are creating a community of learners in the classroom. And again, as I'm thinking about the work we've already heard from today, I am so struck by the way those project-based learning units were really building communities of practice with young people and kind of bringing and designing a set of critical and creative thinking skills to make meaning with one another that were super multimodal. We were using our visual and our bodies. So it's the same kind of thing as what we're going to talk about next, is this how this work allows lots of different pathways. And we know particularly that young people, also different cultures, have different ways of making meaning and knowing. A lot of my background is in Indigenous education as well. So there are different ways that we can make meaning, and our general curriculum that's often quite filled with white supremacy and a very particular kind of normative way of learning. How do we get to kind of disrupt that when we're thinking about human rights education? And part of the way we do that is working in the body, valuing imagination, which I love to think of imagination as, yes, the creative artistic side of imagination, but at the heart of it, it's about thinking beyond yourself, right? It's having that as if and that possibility and that perspective taking that we know is central to anything we're doing in human rights education. And also it can be a culturally responsive space too, because I'm hearing and learning from someone else's perspective and culture and background in my classroom, and having and seeing that there's value to their lives as well as to the experience that I've had. And lastly, this idea of narrative. We've heard in the last 2 presentations and the one we're going to give, we're working with text and book and story. Since the dawn of time, humans have sat around fires and told our stories to one another. And this important way that we share and kind of make connection through story is something that I think we're always trying to bring more into the curriculum. Also because sometimes the given curriculum doesn't have my story in it. It probably has my story in it, but it doesn't maybe have someone else who's a different race or a different background or a different culture. So I think, how are we also making sure that the stories are more rich and diverse and from different perspectives? I think about all of these things as creating a greater sense of belonging, like a safe, brave space where people have the tools to hear different perspectives. They have a kind of way of making meaning, thinking about Jeryl's amazing work around having the students think about different perspectives and understanding and making their own choice about what those perspectives might mean for their own decision on holiday celebration. So again, how is this work all connected up? All right, so we've developed this practice, just so you know a little bit about where we're from. We started doing this work, 15 years ago in the northern interior of Alaska with the Koyukon Athabascan community. We've done a lot of work down in the borderland community between Texas and Mexico. We had a big Department of Ed grant working there with English language learners, lots of places in Texas and the US. A number of years working in Indigenous education and mathematics, numeracy, and literacy in Australia. And then that leads on to the work in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is going to be the rest of our time. This awesome picture, and if you look closely, you can find Alma somewhere in this picture too, because Alma's been a very active participant in this project. We've been working with the U.S. Embassy in Sarajevo to run a couple of years of projects now. Again, I was also quite moved to hear about, a teacher with a student who's now a teacher. I mean, I think this cycle of networks we know is so essential to how we are making changes towards the better in education. So this project is very much about building networks. We've come over to work with incredible teachers who have then know their context and translate work, and then they are becoming teacher trainings in their own context. So I'm going to pass this over to my two colleagues, Senada and Milicia, who are going to take us through the most recent project that we're doing together.
So hi, everyone, and thank you, Katie. So we will just quickly or briefly show you the map of our country, even though I see that many participants are from Bosnia. But this is just to understand a little bit better of what we are going to talk about. So this map that you see, so here we just wanted to emphasize that our country is quite complicated. So, okay, in just a moment, you'll see the map. So yes, so we are a country that is still divided. So Katie, can you just go back to the slide with the map on? Thank you. So there are two entities. So the one in red color is the Republic of Srpska. The rest of it is a really colorful area, is Federation of Bosnia. And then we also have one district, that's this number 2 that you can see in blue color, that is Brčko district. I won't go into details. We just wanted to say that there are 10 different cantons in the Federation of Bosnia. And we are saying this because our educational system is quite complicated, because we do have various educational systems, so which is relevant for what we are doing. So I'll come back to this later. And then, so this project that Katie started talking about, this One Bosnia and Herzegovina, One Book project, is really a countrywide book club for English teachers and high school students that's sponsored by the U.S. Embassy, that's really focused on creative and critical thinking. So in this project, a novel is selected, and this year, this is Dear Martin by Nick Stone. So the novel that Katie showed you, which really provides, thoughts, provoking look into the realities of injustice that's faced by Black youth. So what really this book offers is that students can make connections to their own lives, which is the beauty of it, and that we can discuss issues that are important to them by going through this novel. As we have said, our educational system is quite complicated, which really means that projects such as this one, or projects such as this one, are really extremely important for our country. We are very proud to say that this project there are now over 90 schools that applied for this across the country, and it really shows that teachers really want to bring changes. We want to work together, and that's really the beauty of it. So over the past 6 weeks, this team of One Bosnia, One Book, so teacher team, has led 3 regional trainings for teachers. where teachers are offered different strategies that they can show to their students and different model lessons. And of course, the whole point is supporting critical and creative thinking through analyzing this novel, Dear Martin. So what we will do now, and we will try to do it briefly, is that Senada and I will show you one of our model lessons. And this was part of the training in Sarajevo that Senada and I led together a couple of weeks ago. Okay. So, so this model lesson is really serves as we thought of it as a pre-reading activity, even though this can really be done as a post-reading activity as well. So also all the strategies that we will talk about here can be used really for any teaching context. And we think that's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be, of course, related to this novel or to literature in general, but to human rights. And that's what we will be talking about today. So since the whole idea is to, increase critical and creative thinking, perspective taking, of course, we wanted everything to be as engaging as possible. So we would like to start this model lesson with just a quick, let's say, brainstorming activity for all of us. And we would love for you to participate in this. So what we did in Sarajevo and what we are doing now is really to do a quick brainstorming. And this is just one of the ideas or the ways that you could do brainstorming, or this could be, an icebreaker for your class. So we would like to ask you to visit the website. So it says, you have it on the screen. So www.menti.com. So when you go to the site, it will ask you for the code. So if you could just use the code that you see on the screen. So 6438361, and hopefully that's going to work. So just let us know if something is maybe not working. So what we did with this is really that we wanted to use this. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Maybe you have to use the space. So 64 space 38, or it's working anyway. No, okay, great. So as you are typing the words now, you will see that the words will appear on the screen. And this is a really great brainstorming activity for really any class or any teaching context. So this served as a really great introduction to our lesson plan, because one of the main topics that we wanted to discuss when it comes to Dear Martin is, of course, justice and the way that we perceive justice. So this really served as a really great, I would say, teaser for discussing certain notions. And you can see that if people typed, if there are some words that are repeated, then in this word cloud, they would appear in bigger letters. So you can see that some of the words are repeated, that people share maybe that they are thinking of the same thing at the moment. So you can see the words that appear on the screen. And I think this really serves as a great exercise, or as we have said, as a brainstorming exercise. What it did for us is that this was a great introduction to our lesson, that we had participants really sharing and wanting to analyze further, some of these ideas. For example, why did someone let's say, put the word satisfactory, and how does that fit into someone's, into the way that someone perceives justice? So this could be also done at different levels with students. So we did this was part of the training with teachers. So they really wanted to discuss more and go into details, especially because this was for English teachers. But in general, this could be a really great exercise. And this is an example of, and thank you for participating in this, but this was the example from our workshop. So what are some of the words that come up on the screen, such as equality, civil rights, freedom, peace, and so on, that are maybe the same. We could compare, for example, if we had time, the two and discuss some of this. So we just use this as an introduction to justice. What's interesting is that the main character is also called Justice. So this could be a great introduction to the notion of names and talking about the characters or introducing the characters as well. Okay, so we will go on. The first strategy that we used after the introduction is alphabet relay. It's a very interesting and very neat, I would say, DBP strategy that can be very easily done with any level and in any teaching context. So what we did is that we had five groups. So we had less people in these groups because we were respecting social distancing, but this is maybe even more fun if you have more people, especially for students in groups. So this can really be about competition as well. And here are our participants. So what you do in this strategy is that you give them posters with just the letters from A to Z, where they are supposed to find the words for example, we wanted to discuss social justice. So their task was really to write what comes to their mind that's related from A to Z, that is related to social justice. You can do this in different ways. So this can be really about the time. Whoever finishes first, which can be really interesting for students, is, we can say, the winner. So it can be about the time. It can be also the other way around. It can be about discussion. So we made this one more about discussion because, again, participants were English teachers, so they were really into, discussing everything that's related to social justice. Some of them even, I wouldn't say started fighting, but they wanted to know, why did someone put this word? How is this related to social justice? What is your opinion on this? And so on and so on. So at the end, you really get these posters that you can compare. So we were discussing about some of the words that are repeated and why someone used these words. It can also be really fun if they cannot think of the word. They were very creative. So one group couldn't really think of the word that starts with Q. So they just added like E in front of it, and they just came up with the word equality, which was really great. The whole point is that they had fun, but we also had a great discussion later on about anything that's related to social justice. So of course, this can be very specific for a certain topic. I think this strategy is great for human rights, for any topic that you want to discuss in general. This can also be, for English teachers or for practicing, let's say, adjectives. So you can use it in so many ways. But this was a really powerful tool to discuss some of these. So you can see, there is, for example, democracy, there is courage, there is bravery, free will. So they wanted to discuss some things and they wanted to compare. And we also like the idea that we have these different perspectives, because in the end we had 5 posters that we were able to compare and discuss, which was also interesting for them as well. Okay, so I'll stop here because Senada then will take you through our next strategy, because I don't want to take too much time.
Thank you, Milicia.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. So this is also a great example. I know how we are now all into online teaching, and Senada did this with her students, which is really a great way of this was on Jamboard, right, Senada?
That's right. That's right.
So you can see how this can easily be done online as well, which is really interesting, like to trigger any discussion or to really talk about any issues. But Senada will take over now and continue.
Thank you, Milicia. Yes, I had a lot of fun with my students, like last week when we did alphabet relay, and it's really easy to do it online. And of course, as we are all now in difficult and challenging times where we are all kind of pushed into this world of world of technology, definitely it helps us a lot, and students enjoyed. So I just used the board from Google Meet, where I allowed them all to participate, and they just put in what they thought was right. Okay, so I'm about to present you a strategy that is somewhat more, well, different and I would say difficult, as poetry can be really difficult for some students to understand. That's why I love this strategy, because it makes students think. And it's also what I love about teaching literature and using literature in classes, is that it so subtly deals with things like human rights. So it tackles, sorry, do you all hear some other voices, or I can hear? Okay, great. So basically, yes, community poem. When I tell students, okay, we are now about to write a poem, they're also afraid and reluctant to participate. But in the end, as you will see in the video that we'll show later, you'll see how we have one masterful strategy that begins with individual work, and then we go into group work and forming a whole form of art. So thank you, Katie, for this wonderful strategy. I love it. So we start from individual prompts, and you are about to put a prompt you want from your students to get. So community poem, the first task is for students to write the ending of the sentences. So we are, now it's time for, I want to see. So what are the changes they want to see in their society? Okay, of course, here was the focus on social justice and about justice system. They can see in our country, basically, but in all kinds of aspects, when we are dealing with human rights, they can also add their own ideas. Now it's time for what kind of change they want to see in their society. So it's basically very simple, and we are simply leading them into a more complex things as the strategy develops, as the activity develops. So Katie, can we go to next slide? So when they respond to all of the 3 prompts, they have to choose one that they like the best. Then I get them into groups and tell them, just remind them of some of the poetic devices, even though at the stage where they're just writing the sentences, they might not be aware of how the whole situation and how the whole performance will look like. But of course, reminding them of poetic devices such as rhyme, alliteration, assonance, consonants, something that can add to get a more powerful note. If we have a sentence with rhyme, would be much more powerful during the later performances. Alliteration, so repetition of the same letters at the beginning of the word, is definitely one tool that can make the whole poem and the whole structure more powerful. But of course, these are something that language teachers can use. However, it can be also done with civil rights teachers or any kind of other. I think it can bring a lot of novelty into your teaching methods and teaching strategies to try to do a collective poem on human rights. Can we move to next slide? So this is basically a recipe. So far, you might not understand where this collective poem might lead you to. So basically, among the three prompts that we had at the beginning, students need to choose just one line they want to contribute with. Then they add some gesture to it as well. So it's very important to include your body, because in our classrooms, we are somehow we don't use body as much as we should. And once including the body gesture, so how can you use your body to embody what you're trying to say? It's very difficult at the beginning, but as students get more relaxed as you try to perform, so it can be a very simple gesture. So we are committed to continuing the fight, okay, let's say, for, I don't know, for people with disabilities, let's say. And then you can run slowly to just show with your gestures that that fight might be really slow and might lead to a somewhat slower. So that was my gesture as an example at the workshop that Milicia talked about. After thinking of a gesture that can embody this, the sentence you chose, you group your students as you like. So ideally it would be, I think, 4 to 5 students. So they collaborate to combine lines into one collective poems. So once we have like 5 lines or 4 lines, then we might again think of how to use poetic devices there. Is there a line we want to be like a chorus to be repeated a few times during the performance? Whether to choose some kind of whether we want to sing it or whether we want to emphasize some of the words many times or so. Then the students work in groups in order to create their own poem. And I love this strategy as it moves from individual work to group work so that everybody really is included. Revise collective poem to include gesture, 1, 2 creative elements, and then they work together to form some kind of performance. So in their performances, they might choose gestures that they want to do together. And of course, they are doing after that rehearsing. Rehearse collective poem. Sometimes we do like collective rehearsal, so they are all rehearsing at the same time, which might not put that much pressure on how they perform, because when they create, it's always more difficult than when they just read, okay? But the process of creation, especially with teenagers where I teach, they always feel like they're not up to it. So they always have to be encouraged in some way to do more. And then the final stage of this, this whole strategy is to perform. So basically they are doing their short performances. I love this one because it does not take you a long time. Like whenever you say, okay, let's perform something, usually we have in mind as teachers, like rehearsing for, 2 or 3 months with students, regular rehearsals, but this is like instant click where students can express themselves creatively. Can we go to the next slide? And of course, after they finish with their performances, it's always great to give 3 appreciations. So what is good? So this time, focus only on the good side, and then later we might want to include or give some feedback that might be meaningful for us as teachers. But at this stage, we want to encourage students that they are doing good things. And 3 appreciations would make other students more encouraged to participate and to perform, basically. And I think we are now we will show you, we have really great, amazing group of teachers who were great in their performances, and we want to show them. Because this strategy is one, when we talk about it and when you see how it looks like, it's really something totally different. So I will let you see now. And I'm waiting to hear the comments in the chat box. I'm not sure if...
Well, you need to do the stop share and then share again. And when you click share, click share.
The presentation mode is silent.
Yep, this is what we had the
So
issue.
you want to go to share computer sound.
Yep, it is clicked right now.
Okay.
So let me unclick it and click it again. So I have it clicked. I'm going to go in. Hopefully we'll get this working. Let me start it back. Here we go.
1, action. We are equal, young, and smart. Happy. Now is the time for another social chart. Elections. I want to see the world is changing. Education. Healthcare. Local change. Public transport.
So this was the first group. Of course, we will just show 2 groups as we don't want to, but just for you to get an idea how it really looks like.
As long as there is blood on our hands, due to the absence of justice and mutual trust, our wars will never end. And we refuse to be the soldiers of that war. For so many living beings in the world, being treated with justice is still a lifelong dream.
I want to see more trust. I want to see more respect.
And we refuse to be the soldiers of that war. Will you continue to be the generals?
So literature definitely is a great tool to discuss any kind of social changes, human rights, and it can be used in multiple subjects, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, so it doesn't have to include really just one subject. Okay, so I'm going to pass it to Kate to wrap this up.
Thank you, Senada and Milicia. It was so wonderful to hear you present on that. So this lesson, of course, would end after we shared out the different pieces. We would talk about what was similar or different about them, ways that even as we're thinking back to how our lesson started with our first kind of brainstorm of what justice is, into our A to Z around social justice, and then eventually making our justice poems and what justice means to us. So thinking about that scaffolding, how are students pulling through that thread between where we started and where we ended? Maybe what observations or discoveries did they make about their own understanding of what justice and social change means to them, as well as what did they learn from someone else's perspective? What was a new idea that might be introduced to them? And then maybe, a final kind of relate discussion about, so now what can we do? What are things that we can do? How can we take a step forward? So putting my teacher hat back on, just to kind of, because I know one of the things we were really looking at was literacy as well as the language learning in this lesson, as well as the human rights aspect of Dear Martin. I just want to kind of point out some of the things from a very much a literacy perspective, though I think this ties into human rights work as well. Why these kinds of strategies, and I'm speaking to the things we just spoke about, but also to all the wonderful work that were in the other 2 presentations. So what is it as teachers and facilitators of this kind of work? Do we need to activate our prior knowledge and relevant background experience for our young people when we're doing these kinds of lessons and investigations? Particularly, how are we building schematic knowledge? So how are we complicating or understanding what justice means first before we get into building a poem about it, and kind of, for this classroom, even building a word bank of vocabulary, if you think about how those classrooms had those A to Z vocabulary word banks that students could have pulled from if that was necessary. This is work that's also about setting a purpose for reading. And again, I think you saw that in this lesson, but certainly in the other presentations as well. Building that motivation to read. I'm interested in this now. It has something to do with me. I'm interested in the topic. I've made a personal connection to it. And just this space again of the SEL, the social and emotional space, that I'm also emotionally ready to deal with a really complex book that does have very relevant and sometimes complicated connections to young people's lives in a country like Bosnia and Herzegovina. And how are we getting ready to both build our vocabulary and our way of working with one another on these kinds of topics? I just want to say that there are resources that we have available. This work, initially called Drama-Based Instruction, now called Drama-Based Pedagogy, has a big website that's free and open access to anyone. The link is here, and maybe one of my colleagues can pop that link also into the chat. So there are about 150 lessons up there built by teachers who've been using these strategies all over the world. So feel free to check them out. There are 14 videos, there's 100 strategies written up, and it's just all open access. And, you know, we'd love to have, if you have a lesson that you think would fit up there well, email me. I'd love to include it. That would be great too. We really see this as a sharing space. Let's see, is that my last? I think that's my last slide. So I'm going to pass this back to our facilitators.
Thank you so much, Katie and Senada and Milicia. That was great. I do want to go back and try to get Venant back on. Venant, are you there? I can hear you clicking. Can you try speaking? I'm hearing typing. The Bosnia team, could you answer Kate's question about how Dear Martin was received in BIH?
Sure. I'm going to also ask Alma to join us in this conversation. The thing I'll say about it, from my part of that, I'm going to definitely pass it over to the team that's in country, is we actually started working with this text, actually the same lesson we developed with for the session we did with about 50 educators, which Alma was one of our major mentor teachers in the summer 2019, right? We were supposed to do something 2020 and we didn't because of COVID. So educators, that group of 50 has had this book and 4 days of training to work with this quite a bit. And I'll pass this back over, honestly, to Alma and Milicia and Senada to talk a little bit about how the book and at least the strategies and things have been going on in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Well, we just started the project in November. And as far as students are concerned, the students loved it. We just started discussions, and the students really respond well to the book. They love the language because it's very close to them. They can relate, as we do have similar troubles and a lot of forms of discriminations. And as I just respond to some of the comments there. So yes, we can relate. It's not really the same type of discrimination as to African Americans. It's rather on the multinational level here, because our politics makes us a bit complex when stated that way, because in our country, yes, we do have schools that are segregated and divided by the type of nationality that we kind of that we are defined as one type of nationality, and it definitely is not the case among the kids. But it's something that kind of policymakers push from above, because our presidency and everything is divided into 3 constitutional people, and they most of the time play with people based on that role. And we want young people to kind of push that aside and look at the other people from the perspective of just being a regular citizen in a country, and not to be like the part of certain nationality, and especially cause troubles because of those. So that would be my, I don't know, Alma and Milicia, would you like to add something?
Milicia, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so unfortunately, I'm not part of this, as I'm not working in high school, and I would really love to do this with my students, but this is a project for high schools only. But what I can say is that also the idea is really great, where the U.S. Embassy wants schools partnering, which is really amazing. And the map that we have showed you with entities and, you know, also different cantons. So this is a really great opportunities for schools to be working together, and for students really to be working together and create projects together. So I think that's also the beauty of it, because they'll have a space where they will be able to share their opinion and their perspective, and that's really, really amazing. So Alma, if you want to add something, I haven't worked on this book with my students. I have done the strategies, but not, you know, not something from Dear Martin. but I think this is really a great chance for our students really to compare. This is a great space for them to talk about these issues, because we are all aware, we are exposed to everything that's going in the States at the moment, but in general, because we do watch a lot, our students watch a lot of movies, so they are into, they're well aware of everything that's going on. And then I think that they do feel closely with these topics that they can also relate to our country as well. So Alma, if you want to add something, please.
Thank you so much, Milica. I would just like to say that I'm really just, like Kate said, when it comes to her school, I'm very glad to have all of you here, of course, but especially Katie and Milica and Senada, because I also worked with them a lot on the DBP initiatives here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I feel very proud to see the three of you here too. And of course, Jeryl and Aimable and Venan as well. When it comes to DBP and all of the projects and programs that we did here, we did so many of them by now. All of them, especially the first one, triggered several shifts in focus when it comes to our approach to language and literature teaching and learning here. I would point out three things. First of all, it's collaboration between teachers across entities and across curricula. That was the first thing that we really realized we needed. And I think we're currently working on it as much as we can. The second thing is systemic change in the attitudes to teaching English as a foreign language and teaching literature through teaching English in schools, because there is a heightened view here, and we're still trying to work with it, in the sense that teaching English as a foreign language is teaching language construction, right? Grammar and vocabulary, and that's it. So we're definitely looking at changes, calling for change in these attitudes, and we're advocating for mandatory reading in elementary schools and high schools. We still don't have that. It's up to the teachers' individual choice to include reading and reading lists in their foreign language classrooms. So we are currently definitely advocating for that. There's still a long way to go, I would say, but I personally proposed for the book Dear Martin to be included in our mandatory list in the canton of Sarajevo. We'll see what happens. And this third thing is how to incorporate these transversal skills such as critical thinking and creativity, but also human rights and nonviolent communication when teaching a foreign language, teaching language generally. So those are the things that were, honestly speaking, triggered much more. We were aware of them, but they were triggered much more by the DBP project. And that's why I'm really proud to have the three of you with us today. And I can't wait to see where all of this takes us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. Thank you, everybody. So we're going to stop the webinar, and we want to thank everybody for coming, but I'm putting in the chat box a link for a meeting that I'll open up next. So our panelists will be there. And if you want to ask any questions or just chat, share some ideas with what you're doing in your own classroom, we would love to talk with you. It's just for an extra 30 minutes. And we thought we'd set it up as a meeting so people could have a more informal space and we can actually see you there. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to everybody who's attended today. And we hope to see you in the next segment. And you can just click on that link. I'm going to leave it there for a minute and it will take you there, and we'll all be there momentarily. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, and see you soon.